If it's undercovered, underreported, or a waste of time, you can be sure we'll be heard. Nothing is off limits.
Welcome to Broad Street Radio.
Welcome to Broad Street Radio. I'm Michael Morris. Behind the wheels of steel, Nathan Schoner. And today's an important show because I brought John E. Kash, Johnny Meenach in here. John, not only are you a friend, you actually handle my finances. These both are true, or one of them?
Partially true.
Okay, one of the two is probably true.
Yeah. I'll let you guys figure out which one.
Let me tell you why I wanted you to come today, because you and I talk a lot about what's, I don't know, for the last 2 or 3 years about what's going on in the economy. So we were in the boom era. And we're going to be here for the bust era.
Dude, it was a weird, really weird era. Like 2020.
I don't even like to refer to 2020 anymore because
it feels like it's been the longest 3 years of my life. Like
2020 felt like the movie The Eternals. It felt like I decided to spend money to be part of this. It would never end. It felt painful, and at the end, I felt like somebody stuck their finger in me.
So I was going to make a Heat reference because
by all means,
long ass movie.
Yes, but see, there was a payoff at the end.
There was, but man, the middle of it, holy shit, that felt like watching paint dry.
What would be a way to classify what we're seeing right now? Nate and I like to say it's end of the world.
No, it's not the end of the world.
I know.
I like to say that.
I say that to him because I want him to leave his wife and family, like he's going to run away, like in that movie 28 Days Later. Yeah. And then it was just a joke. You can come back.
Yeah.
No.
Psych.
No.
It's interesting times. There's not a whole lot of points in history that we can relate to in terms of what we're seeing now with the ending of quantitative easing, the reduction of the bond buying that the Federal Reserve's doing, interest rate hikes. We've done that before. I think it was in '94. Alan Greenspan hiked interest rates like, I don't know, 6 or 7 times, and he hiked it by like 4%. What's interesting, I was talking to a friend of mine who's a wholesaler for a mutual fund company, which shall remain nameless, but he said this time's different. And normally when someone says, hey, this time's different, we're like, no, it's not different, because every market has cycles. Everything, you're going to have boom and bust cycles. That's just normal, right? Markets go up, they come down, they go back up, right? That's pretty typical. But this time is a little different in the fact, I think the things that have changed are the speed of information. So we're in a 24-hour news cycle, and you can literally, with this magical device, you can find out anything and everything that you want to find out. I mean, you can even find out if the big guy had anything to do with his business partners. And
who's the big guy? We'll cover that later.
We'll talk about that later. Back in '94, we didn't have that. We didn't have cell phones, and if they did, it was very rare. They didn't have information right at your fingertips. So the other thing that he mentioned, my buddy who I was talking to yesterday, he said, back in '94, Greenspan probably was not as straightforward or transparent about what he was doing, and so the market reacted differently. Whereas now, everyone knows that whatever Jerome Powell says he's going to do, he's going to do. He says, hey, we're going to raise interest rates by 75 basis points. Holy shit, they raised 75 basis points. Weird. I didn't think that would happen. Like, that's the kind of thing that we're dealing with now. So it's a little different in that aspect. But we've been here before in terms of where interest rates are, housing interest rates. To buy a 30-year mortgage is almost at 8% now. A year and a half ago, it was less than 3%.
Was it 77 or 81? It used to be like 13 or 17%.
Yes, back in the late 70s, early 80s. I mean, you were paying 13, 14, 15%. Okay.
Standard, like you expected it.
Exactly. And the other piece is that you had to have 20% down.
Right.
Like a normal,
like anything that you would buy, you would literally have to have the money on hand to buy it, like it should be, versus a credit card era.
I know it's a really weird concept.
Well, but you brought up housing, and I want to touch on this because we have a dear friend that would we say doesn't listen?
Yeah, I would agree.
That's in the market.
I've got several dear friends.
That's true. So
that
we
don't listen.
We have 3 friends that. So you and I will have these conversations, and it's never doom and gloom, because I'm going to tell you the way I look at this. as a person that does invest money, I need this son of a bitch to tank because I'm going to buy Google stock at $8 and it's going to bounce back in 10 years. And as long as I live that long or I pass it on to my daughter, it's the future I'm looking at. Right. I'm not worried about today. And I think too 100%. Many people run looking at their shoes.
That's a great analogy.
I mean,
I'm going to steal that. I'm going to start using that with clients. Yeah.
I always tell people what in marketing, well, I'm really busy today. I don't give a shit about today. Where are you going to be in 12 months? And if you're not thinking that way about your business, you're not thinking about your finances that way, it's where do I want to be?
Right.
Like you always say that. You always say it's where you want to be at the end.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, the current economy we're in, I don't know if we did a show. I would like to go back and look and see if we did a show talking about this back when, maybe January, February of this year. It'd be interesting to see, because I've been saying for a long time that they've got this wrong. And what I mean by that is the Fed has one tool to fight inflation, and that's to raise interest rates, which the purpose of doing that is to tamp down and slow down demand. It's not a demand problem. It's a supply problem. And the supply problem is nobody wants to go to work. I mean, every company, because I deal with small business owners, big business owners. I deal with 401ks and simple IRAs and employee retirement plans. Every single company I work with is hiring. They can't find people to work.
Right.
And that's the biggest challenge that they have. And so if we could solve that problem, if we could get people off their asses and get them back to work, go make $20 or $30 an hour driving a forklift. That would solve a lot of the problems that we're having right now. But people don't want to do that.
Well, you're asking people to change their behavior. And when you train people that the government will give you money at any point, it's the same reason. I just had this conversation with somebody. Why are there so many poor people? Why are there so many homeless and all that? Because you act as you know. So if your family survived by being on the dole and the government gave you money, you see that you don't achieve more.
Right.
You achieve what you've seen or less. So in highly motivated individuals, people always talk about the Trump family, the Bidens or whatever, all great people, friends of the show, but they have to achieve because the pressure of the legacy of those names, because they're known. You can't be a guy who works at the Costco. You know what I mean? You better go to law school, even if they just pass you by because your name is on the piece of paper. But you have to achieve. It's the same way when you're in a low achievement area. If there's no motivation, you do as you see. So you do even worse because there's still money coming out. And that's what happened in 2020 is that stay at home.
Yep.
Right? So what did they do? They gave you money and people spent it. They didn't save it. They spent it on goods as the supply was running out. So that goes to your supply chain conversation.
Yeah. Well, I'll make one point, something slightly different. They did save a lot of it. Now, you still couldn't keep TVs in stock at Walmart whenever those Trump bucks were coming out, right? But the savings rate exploded over that 2020 year. The savings rate went up by like 40% in a year, and that's insane.
In a time that it's impossible to look back at any time in history and look at it without working, especially.
Right.
Boom, you've got money, and you're sitting on it.
That's exactly right. And then you couldn't travel. You couldn't go out to eat. You could order food maybe, and they might drop it off, in a hazmat suit, that kind of thing. But, yeah, that was the real problem is that all these people got paid. If you were a family of four, you were making $100,000 a year to sit at home.
Right.
Assuming you were a non-essential employees, us essential people had to get our asses off the couch and go to work.
Yeah, there were no days off.
There were no days off. I got 0 COVID days. So
even when you got COVID, I got COVID and I still had to work. Now I worked in my house, but it was like I still had to do the work.
Yep, exactly. The work didn't stop. I still had to suck it up and man up and go do what I needed to do. So the issue is that we've now created this facade, this glass ceiling where people think, oh, I can just sit at home and continue to collect a paycheck. Everyone will take care of me. It's someone else's problem, right? That's how these individuals think about it. Well, it's not my problem. I mean, I got paid. I got money in the bank. I can do whatever I want. But here's the great news. And this is truly, it's wonderful news. Savings rate has tanked,
right?
Which means people spending money out of their banks. Credit card rates are skyrocketing, meaning people are putting their expenses on credit cards. Why is this phenomenal news? Well, because at some point they got to go back to work. Right. At some point they're going to get squeezed enough to where they realize, holy shit, I've really made a huge mistake. I need that $20 or $30 an hour job.
So when you look at housing, this is what I find funny about the whole thing. The people that I was referring to earlier, they were so busy and they were killing it and telling these success stories and all that. And in the last 11 weeks, they haven't been saying that.
Been a few less of those stories.
But we just this morning here, it's getting icky out there.
Yeah.
What I've been trying to say to these same people, and you've been in these conversations, is it's going to swing back the other way. We live, everything that we do is a very yin and yang situation.
100%.
So as much as this goes to this is the all-time high,
yep,
it will not come back to 75%. It's going to swing to an all-time low because everything has to balance, right?
Yep. Yeah.
So when I look at that, Nate and I think we're talking about it in here one day, is that if you're not prepared for what you need to do as an individual or a business owner or whatever, you're going to fail. It is the same thing with your personal finances.
100%.
There was a time when everyone could have given you money and said, plan me out my next 20, 30 years. How busy were you during that time? I mean, I know you were busy, but I'm saying, how many people were like, hey man, I got oil money. What do I do with it?
Yeah. No, the interesting thing is that no one wants to, and I'm going to generalize this, but nobody wants to talk to their financial advisor when things are good, right? Because, hey, man, it's all good. Amazon's at an all-time high. You know what? We should buy some more of it. And, my response to my clients, because it's not only what I believe is true, but it's also my responsibility and my duty to rein people in. It's like, hey, listen, we can buy Amazon at an all-time high, and yeah, it'll probably go up, and it more than likely it's going to make money long term. But why don't we just exercise some patience
and buy a car?
Buy it when it's a little bit lower, because the thing is that there's this process, and I've talked about this before. When it comes to investing, and honestly anything in our lives, it's bred in our DNA. It's called recency bias. We all have it. And what it is that what has recently happened, we expect to continue to happen. So when markets are high, clients are saying, I want to buy, even though it's at an all-time high, because it's going to go higher. In their mind, they are telling themselves, convincing themselves, like you even said, they will emotionally fight you tooth and nail on their beliefs.
Right.
And they'll give you every reason why it's going to go higher. And then the same thing happens when the market, like right now, it's an absolute shit market for this year. So everyone says, well, I don't want to invest now because it's going to go lower. And the reality is that they're usually wrong. When the market's at an all-time high, the higher the market goes, the more risky it becomes. Same thing with housing. The higher housing goes, the closer we're to a correction. I mean, this is how it works. It's called a reversion to the mean. This is straight math. It doesn't lie.
Nate, that should be our band name.
Reversion
of the mean.
No.
So Nate, start working on t-shirts.
There you go. So now I'm trying to fight people like, hey, listen, now is an opportunity to buy some high quality stuff at a much more reasonable price. You're buying stuff that you could have bought 2 years ago.
You know what pisses me off about that is you're 100% right about that. And you know what people say? Well, yeah, because you make money on it. First of all, you make money on things if you're doing well for them.
Yes.
Right?
Accurate.
If they're not making money, you're not making money.
I'm still making money.
I mean, you're still making money because
paid less.
You're selling drugs. But what I'm saying is it does affect
everybody
you too.
Has to have a side hustle.
Well, let's say, trust me, that's what this whole show's based on. Everybody looks at it and says, I'm just going to wait to see where the bottom is.
Right.
You don't know. It's
not going to happen.
I think we think of this in terms of swimming pools when we should think of it as oceans. Like it's impossible to touch the bottom of the ocean because your body will just cave in from the pressure.
Yeah,
right.
That's accurate.
But people will go, oh, that swimming pool's 12 feet. So I'm comfortable because I know.
Yeah.
It is that uncomfortability factor. Is that even a word?
It is now. We're going to make it up.
No, it's not a word.
Let's submit it.
I literally have Nate here just to say if that's a real word or not. But when you don't know the depth, you get scared.
Yeah.
If I said that pool's 20 feet, you go, oh, I got 20. I know what 20 feet is.
Yeah.
You don't know what 20 feet is because you never experienced that, right?
Correct.
But when I say it is the bottom cannot be reached physically, mentally, then you go, oh, that's too scary. I'm not asking you to go all the way to the bottom. I'm just asking you to let's see how far we can go before we get in trouble. And I think that's why the stock market is where people are going to go, oh, it just keeps losing. At some point, it's going to rebound, and you're not going to get a tip on your phone that, hey, today's the day.
Right. There's no there's always signs that we look for, capitulation, things like that, where what that is where we see huge volumes of selling. Like when you see massive volumes of selling, that's usually a pretty good indication that the fear factor is at an all-time high, right? And so, it's once you see that, then you're like, okay, there's got to be somewhere we're close to a bottom. Are you going to get it perfect? No, you're never going to get it perfect. Here's the thing that bothers me the most is that when I call someone and say, hey, Amazon's trading at I don't know what the hell it is today, $100, $120 a share, whatever it is. And now's a good opportunity to buy some. You need some exposure to some tech companies. Here's why you should own a little bit of this. And they say, well, no. The market's bad. I don't want to buy it. 2 years ago, they wanted to buy it when it was at an all-time high.
Right.
But now we can get it at the exact same price. So why do you not want to buy it now? Because of recency bias. Market's going lower, so I want to wait. That's the thing that I have to fight. I got to fight fear and greed. So the interesting thing, though, to kind of tie this back to the housing market is I always tell my own personal story. I bought my first house in September of 2009 in Hilliard. And so the financial markets, if anybody remembers the Great Recession, it was from October of 2007 until March of 2009. So 6 months after the bottom, the market had already started recovering, and it was a pretty quick recovery. At that point in time, there were big ups from March on, right? So 6 months later, I buy my house. 2 years later, I go to refinance to try to get a better rate, and my house still wasn't worth what I paid for it. So the housing market follows the equity markets, but housing is much, much slower to react. It's this weird thing where...
Well, you know why? Because it's an actual physical asset that you can see.
Right.
Versus... I can paint a picture that, I sent you that thing yesterday, just not like, hey, let's buy this. Let's just find out what's going on. And it was a company that deals in nuclear energy and that, and it's trading at $3. By the time I send it to you, it's gone up to $4. Mm-hmm. Doesn't mean a lot.
Right.
But if it eventually goes to $6 and you got in at $3 and you bought a shitload of it, that's a win, right?
Yeah. Oh, 100%.
But it also could go backwards because of geopolitical issues.
Yep.
So that's not technically a safe thing to do. But with a house, someone looks at it and goes, the house has been sitting there for 30 years. We know it's not going to fall down, all that. My problem with housing is this. Well, and actually, one of our first shows...
people have to have it, too.
Yes, you need shelter.
You have to have
Unless
shelter.
you live in California, and those people just have tents.
Yeah.
I was... one of the first shows we did, and again...
Marty?
No. What if I say show and Marty was on it, that's a shout. Marty shouting at me for half an hour, looking at Nate, glaring at him. I love him. But when he gets on a roll, we're not doing a show. He's yelling, and I have to listen to it for 27 minutes.
Best 27 minutes of the show.
For you. For me, I'm over here weeping like a child. But one of the, I think it was the first 4 or 5 shows, this is when the market was really blowing up. And Kendra was sitting right here.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. And her reaction to Bill was actually there, and they're like, "Can you believe the housing prices? Can you believe what houses are worth and all this stuff?" And I said, and I didn't know Kendra that well at the time, and I said, "I know why you're excited about this because you're fucking people over. You're selling them a house at 30% more than it's worth, and when the housing market crashes, they're not going to lose 30%. They're going to lose 50% on this." And she stopped and said, "You're right." Because you're selling an asset. The asset's only worth what the market will pay.
100%.
So I've told you this before. 2009, I'm in a house that my family has owned since Christopher Columbus came over here to give everybody sickle cell. So that house was worth $110,000. So if you looked at anything on the street, again, it's just a small neighborhood.
Yeah.
A big house for one person, but not enough for 4 people.
Right.
I went from 110 to one 22 years later, that house is worth $275,000. I've not done one thing other than cut the grass, and I barely do that
I
shit.
was going to say, I've heard
Right?
that's not the truth.
Oh, if you've driven by, it looks like there's a jungle cat in there.
I drive by every day, and it's more Amazon jungle
Yeah.
than the Amazon jungle.
Well, that's why
Are
I
you,
tell when
are
I
you shooting the scenes for Predator, the next Predator
yeah
movie?
when I order from Amazon, I say throw it in the Amazon and it's in the front yard. But the point being, I didn't do anything to improve the property.
Right.
The
It's just
value of
supply
that
and
went
demand.
up because of supply and demand.
Yep.
So if you take a market like Columbus, you can take any market, but this is the only city that the freeway is built in a perfect circle.
Yep.
Everything inside of that circle has value because you can't make more land. Right?
Correct.
That's the number one rule of real estate is land.
Yep.
So because when the crash happened in 2007 through 2009, home builders went out of business. Condo and apartment places did not. Okay.
Right.
So only 65% of all of Columbus is dedicated to housing, not new housing. That's total because we're running out of places to build unless we expand outside of Interstate 270.
Yeah.
But the farther out you get, what schools are they going to? What restaurants, what mall, whatever it is, what lifestyle do I have?
Yeah.
So that's what's making these homes artificially go up. But again, if you bought a house that 10 years ago was worth $275 and you paid $350, by April, that house is going to be worth $250. You have negative equity in a property you just bought.
That's more than likely accurate. I think the one thing that will help the Columbus housing market was just demand. Demand
will always be there.
Well, but it's stupid. I mean, Columbus and Austin, Texas, are the two fastest growing cities in the United States, and it's ridiculous. So there's always going to be a demand, but demand is going to continue to prop up prices. Are we in the business of predicting things? No, absolutely not. Anybody that should be
awesome.
Tarred and feathered
Oh,
because they don't know what
they're
they don't know
not
what they're
good.
talking about.
Not good.
You shouldn't be predicting things. But with that said, I do foresee that there's going to be some kind of a correction in housing. How bad is it going to be? I don't know. I think it'll just play out. And
The prediction is by April it's down 40%. Now, again,
I hope it is.
It was up 35%.
in
at
one
point.
year.
Right.
I mean,
but that's what I'm saying.
over the last 5 years,
but
it's
the
up
correction
500%.
again, the correction is to get you where you're supposed to be.
Yes.
So that's not necessarily bad. It's only bad if you bought a house for $550,000 and it was worth $450,000.
Yeah.
At that point, I would be, murder suicide. You know what I mean?
Well, I mean, as long as you have a job, you'll be fine. Oh, wait.
Yeah.
What, you mean there's going to be layoffs?
Well, we're gonna have to do a whole another show. But Facebook, for the first time in its life cycle,
Yep.
let go of 12,000 people in one day.
That's accurate.
If the tech stocks are going, hey, there's nothing here for you, because we're not making profit.
Yep.
Trust me, when you work at Walmart or any of these other places, it's going to be the same thing.
So I heard this, and I know we got to wrap up here in a minute, but I heard this just the other day. So John Hancock sponsors, like they've got a box at Fenway Park, whatever the Boston Bruins play in. They probably have a box in that arena. And I think the person told me they spend about $5 million a year per suite, right? They have non-renewed those for next year and the foreseeable future. Right. And so what got me thinking was, okay, $10 million, that's a lot of money to save for a company that makes billions. So either they're pinching pennies because they are really nervous, or somebody got promoted and they had to make a name for themselves. So they thought, hey, I'll save the company $10 million. I don't know which it is,
but in
we're about to
Boston,
find out. Yeah,
I mean, that's literally like saying in Catholic, I'm not going to church for a few years.
Exactly.
That's how big it is. I mean, they've had that for probably 80 years in all those venues. Because there are people that move to Boston just to watch the Red Sox their entire life. You're giving up something where people are going to go, huh? Like if you've noticed, Pepsi's not a sponsor of the Super Bowl anymore.
That's another one.
Okay. They were all over it. Amazon stepped in because Amazon can literally shit money. And Pepsi will make you shit if you drink too much of it. Listen, we're going to wrap on that, but I want you to say one positive thing before we go.
There's some really, really great real estate prices in Florida.
Perfect. Bring your own hammer. That's been Broad Street Radio. We'll see you next week.